Some encounters don't announce themselves. They appear when we least expect them, on street corners where life insists on pushing us against the wall. Some gazes pierce through layers of fear, exhaustion, and silent surrender, and reach the core where something resembling hope still beats. This is the story of two hearts that met on the sidewalk of abandonment under the dim, flickering light of a street lamp that seemed as afraid of the dark as they were. She carried the weight of a lifetime on her shoulders. He carried the emptiness of everything money could never fill. And it was there, in that fragile, improbable moment, that fate decided to intervene, because some stories aren't born of chance. They are born of the urgent need of two human beings who, more than anything, needed to be seen. Subscribe to the channel for more stories that touch the heart. The sidewalk was deserted, but Helena felt as if the whole world was watching her. The cleaning bucket felt heavy on her left arm, her worn backpack sagged from her right shoulder, and her dragging footsteps echoed in the pre-dawn silence. She just wanted to get home, take a hot shower, collapse onto her narrow bed, and forget for a few hours that she existed. But then the patrol car pulled up beside her. Two officers got out with that calculated haste of people who've already decided to blame before asking. The taller one crossed his arms, his gaze sweeping over her from head to toe. The other stepped too close, invading the space she tried to protect by hunching her shoulders. "ID!" the first one commanded, his voice as hard as concrete. Helena swallowed hard. Her hands trembled as she fumbled for her wallet in her backpack. She knew she hadn't done anything wrong, but fear doesn't need logic. "I'm just coming from work," she mumbled, almost apologizing for her existence. "That's what they all say," the younger officer replied, a low chuckle escaping him. That's when the black car appeared. It pulled over slowly, as if time itself had decided to decelerate. The door opened, and Lorenzo stepped out with the bearing of someone who'd never had to raise his voice to be heard. He wore an impeccable dark suit, but there was something in his eyes, a deep weariness, an ancient sadness that contrasted with the relentless elegance of his attire. He looked at Helena, simply looked, and in that second she felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the sensation of being seen. "Good evening," Lorenzo said, his voice calm but firm. "Is there a problem here?" The officers turned, taken aback. The taller one frowned, trying to reassert his authority. "Just a routine stop, sir." "I see." Lorenzo walked until he was beside Helena, not touching her, but close enough for her to feel his presence like an invisible shield. "This lady works in the building I manage. She's returning from her night shift. I don't believe there's any need for further inconvenience." A heavy silence fell. Helena held her breath. She didn't know who this man was, but something about him, perhaps his unwavering calm, perhaps the way he positioned himself between her and danger, made her want to believe that, for once, the world wouldn't crush her. The officers exchanged glances. The younger one shrugged. The older one grumbled something unintelligible and waved a hand, as if dismissing an annoyance. "All right, you can go." They got back into the patrol car and drove off, leaving behind the faint smell of exhaust and humiliation. Helena stood frozen, still trembling. Lorenzo turned to her, and for the first time their eyes truly met. There was something there she couldn't name, something that hurt and soothed simultaneously. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice low. She nodded, but no sound came out. She just shook her head, trying to compose herself. Lorenzo hesitated, as if he wanted to say more, but didn't know how. "May I give you a ride home?" "No." The answer was too quick, almost sharp. Helena regretted it instantly, but didn't correct herself. She didn't trust kindness offered freely, not from men like him. Lorenzo simply nodded, understanding. "All right, but if you need anything, I'll be around." Udun. And then he got into his car and drove away, leaving Helena alone on the sidewalk with a racing heart and a strange sensation in her chest. As if something had begun there, even if she didn't know what it was yet. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from and subscribe to get touching stories every day. In the following days, Helena tried to forget the encounter. But every time she entered the office complex where she worked, she felt a pang of anticipation, as if, in some dark corner of her heart, she was expecting to see him again. And then, on a rainy Thursday, she saw him. Lorenzo was in the lobby talking to the building manager. When their eyes met, he stopped mid-sentence. She quickly averted her gaze, quickening her pace towards the service elevator. But before the doors could close, a hand held the edge. Lorenzo stepped in. The silence between them was almost palpable. Helena stared fixedly at the numbers above the door. He stood beside her, so close she could smell the subtle, woody, soft cologne he wore, a scent that contrasted with the harshness of the world outside. Helena, right, D. She blinked, surprised. She hadn't imagined he knew her name. Yes, she replied, her voice weaker than she would have liked. I just wanted to make sure you were okay. Since that day. She turned her face towards him, and for the first time, allowed herself to truly look at him. Lorenzo had strong features, a firm jawline, but there was an unexpected softness in his brown eyes, as if he carried a pain he showed no one. I am, she said, and it was almost true. The doors opened. Helena exited first, but before walking away, she turned back. Thank you for what you did. Lorenzo smiled, but it was a sad smile. It was nothing. And that's when everything changed, because Helena realized in that instant that this man wasn't there out of pity. He was there because, in some way, he too needed to be saved. Helena lived in a neighborhood where houses huddled close together as if trying to shield themselves from the cold. The apartment was small, but neat. She cared for every corner with the same dedication she put into her work, because this was the only place in the world that was truly hers. At night, after her shower, she would sit by the window with a mug of warm tea and watch the street. Sometimes she thought of the daughter she lost years ago in an accident that still woke her up in the middle of the night. Sometimes she thought of her ex-husband who abandoned her when the pain became too much to share. But most of the time, she just tried not to think at all, until Lorenzo started showing up, not intentionally, or at least that's what he said. He was always passing by the building, always with a plausible excuse. A last-minute meeting, a forgotten document, a chat with the building manager. But Helena knew. She saw the way he slowed down when he passed her, the way he looked for her, even while pretending not to, and something inside her, something she thought was dead, began to awaken. Lorenzo lived in a huge apartment on top of a glass building where the entire city stretched out at his feet like a map of unfulfilled promises. He woke early, worked late, attended endless meetings where everyone agreed with him because it was easier than confronting him. But at night, when he was alone, the silence was deafening. His mother had died 6 months ago. Cancer, fast, cruel, relentless. She had been the only person who truly loved him, who saw him beyond his last name and fortune. And now that she was gone, Lorenzo felt like a ship adrift, with no port, no destination. That was why he stopped on that sidewalk, because he saw something in Helena that he recognized, the loneliness of someone carrying the world alone. And for the first time in months, he felt a desire not to be alone anymore. They started talking. At first, it were just quick exchanges in the hallway, a good morning here, a how are you there. But gradually, the conversations grew longer. Lorenzo discovered that Helena enjoyed reading old novels in her free time. She discovered that he played the piano, but hadn't played since his mother died. Why? Helena asked one day, as she wiped down the glass of a conference room. Lorenzo was sitting in a nearby chair, pretending to check emails on his phone. Because there's no point in playing for anyone. And what if you played for yourself? He looked up, surprised. No one had ever suggested that. Helena smiled faintly, a shy smile that lit up her tired face. Sometimes we forget that we deserve to be cared for too. Lorenzo remained silent, but those words echoed within him for days. One Friday afternoon, Helena found an envelope in the locker room. Inside there was a handwritten note. "You reminded me that there are still good people in the world. Thank you for that. L." She held the paper with trembling hands, her chest tightening. She didn't know if it was fear or hope, perhaps both. Because the heart had other plans. Helena had a friend at work, Vera, a middle-aged woman who talked too loud and laughed even louder. Vera was the first to notice. "That handsome fella's got his eye on you, huh?" Helena almost dropped her bucket. "What fella?" "The one in the suit, the rich one. Every time he walks by here, he stares at you like a lost puppy." "You're crazy, Vera." But Vera just laughed and nudged her shoulder. "You're crazy if you don't take advantage. A man like that doesn't come around every day." Helena shook her head, but Vera's words kept replaying. She knew Vera was wrong. Men like Lorenzo didn't take an interest in women like her. Not really. At best it was pity, but then why did he keep coming back? Lorenzo also had someone who noticed. His partner, Fernando, a pragmatic and direct man, confronted him during a business lunch. "You've been acting strange." "Strange how?" "Distracted, less present." Fernando narrowed his eyes. "Does it have to do with that woman?" Lorenzo froze. "What woman?" "The cleaner. I heard you intervened in a police approach because of her. That you've been stopping by the building more than necessary." "So what?" Fernando sighed. "Lorenzo, I understand you're going through a difficult time, but you need to be careful. The press loves that kind of story. Billionaire CEO and the maid, they'll crucify you." "I don't care about the press." "You should, and you should care about her too. You think you're helping, but you might be putting her at risk." Lorenzo stood up abruptly, his jaw clenched. "This conversation is over." But Fernando's words haunted him for the rest of the day. That night, Lorenzo arrived at the building later than usual. He knew Helena would be there, finishing up cleaning the upper floors. He took the stairs, trying to get his thoughts in order. When he found her, she was kneeling on the floor, scrubbing a stubborn stain on the carpet. Her hair was pulled back in a loose bun, and there was a weariness etched on her slumped shoulders. "Helena." She looked up, startled. When she saw it was him, something softened on her face. "Hey." Lorenzo knelt beside her, unconcerned about his expensive suit. "Can I ask you something?" She nodded, cautious. "Why do you always run from me?" Helena was silent for a long moment. Then she put down the cloth and sat back on her heels. "Because I know how these stories end." "What stories?" "Stories where people like me get their hopes up about people like you." The words hung heavy between them. Lorenzo felt something crack in his chest. "You think that's what this is? Getting my hopes up?" "I don't know what it is." She looked at him with a sadness that ached. "But I know it can't work out." "Why not?" "Because you're you, and I'm me." Lorenzo slowly, hesitantly, reached out and lightly touched her fingers. Helena didn't pull away. What if I didn't care about that? She couldn't imagine what she'd feel in that instant. The touch was light, almost imperceptible, but it burned like a brand. "Then you'd be a fool," she whispered. Lorenzo smiled, a sad one. "Maybe I am." And for the first time, Helena allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't a mistake. The following weeks were a delicate dance between closeness and distance. Lorenzo started bringing Helena coffee during her breaks. She'd protest, saying he didn't have to, but she never refused. They talked about everything and nothing: books, music, childhood memories, forgotten dreams. Helena learned that Lorenzo had grown up mostly alone, raised by nannies and tutors while his parents traveled the globe building empires. He discovered she'd lost her daughter at 7 years old in a car accident that had shattered her from the inside out. "How did you move on?" Lorenzo asked on one of these late-night encounters. "I didn't," Helena replied, her voice low. "I just kept going. It's different." He understood, because that was exactly what he'd been doing since his mother died. One night, Lorenzo asked her to dinner. Helena was so surprised she almost dropped the coffee mug she was holding. Dinner? Nothing fancy, just food and conversation. She wanted to refuse. She knew she should, but there was something in his eyes, a hope so fragile it looked like it might shatter, that stopped her. "Okay," she said before she could regret it. His smile was like the sunrise. Lorenzo took her to an understated restaurant, far from the spotlight and cameras. They sat in a secluded booth, where the light was soft and the music low. Helena felt awkward in Vera's borrowed dress, but Lorenzo looked at her as if she were the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. During dinner, they laughed. Really laughed. Helena couldn't remember the last time she'd laughed like that, and Lorenzo realized he hadn't felt this light in years. When they left, the night was chilly. Lorenzo offered his jacket, and she accepted. They walked side by side down the empty streets, unhurried, as if they wanted to stretch that moment out as long as possible. That's when Lorenzo stopped. "Helena." She turned. He looked at her for a long moment, as if gathering the courage for something impossible. "I don't know what I'm doing," he confessed, his voice rough, "but I know that when I'm with you, I feel alive for the first time in a long time." Her heart pounded. She knew she should pull away, protect them both. But she couldn't move. "Lorenzo, I know it's complicated. I know the whole world will think it's wrong, but I can't pretend I don't feel what I feel." He took a step closer. She held her breath. "And what do you feel?" "Everything," he whispered. And as he leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull back, Helena realized she didn't want to pull back. She wanted to dive in head first, even knowing she might drown. But at the last second, she turned her face away. The almost kiss hung in the air like an unfulfilled promise. "I can't," she murmured, her eyes welling up. "I'm sorry." Lorenzo stepped back, pain visible on his face, but he nodded, respecting her boundary. "It's okay, I understand." But Helena's heart screamed the opposite. Helena stopped going to the building for 3 days straight. She called, saying she was sick, but the truth was she couldn't face him. Because she knew if she saw him again, she wouldn't have the strength to pull away. Lorenzo went crazy. He drove past the building every day, hoping to find her. He asked Vera, but she just said Helena needed some time. He sent texts that went unanswered. He left notes that weren't replied to. And for the first time in his life, Lorenzo knew what it felt like to be powerless. When Helena finally returned, she was different, more withdrawn, more distant. Lorenzo tried to get close, but she avoided him with a painful skill, until he couldn't take it anymore. "Why are you doing this?" They were alone in the parking garage late at night. Helena was getting on the bus when he reached her. "Doing what?" "Running from me." She closed her eyes, trying to hold back tears. "Because it's the right thing to do." "For who?" "For both of us." Her voice echoed in the empty space. Lorenzo took a step back, hurt. "You think I care about what others think? That I care about money, status, any of that? You should." Helena was crying now. "Because I know how the world works, Lorenzo, and I know people like me don't get happy endings with people like you. Then give me a chance to prove you wrong." "I can't." "Why?" "Because I'm scared," she sobbed, the words finally escaping. "Scared of getting hurt. Scared of hurting you. Scared that in the end, when you realize I'm not enough, I won't be able to survive another loss." Lorenzo felt his chest tighten. He wanted to hug her, to take all that pain and carry it away, but she was already climbing onto the bus. "Helena, wait!" But the doors closed, and as the bus pulled away, Lorenzo stood there, alone in the dark, feeling as if he'd lost something he never knew he needed. It was Vera who told Lorenzo. She found him in the lobby, days after the confrontation in the parking garage, and pulled him into a corner. "She lost a daughter," Vera said, her eyes serious. 8 years ago, the girl was 7, hit by a car right in front of her. Lorenzo felt the ground disappear from beneath his feet. Oh my God! Her husband couldn't handle the grief and left her alone with the guilt, the mourning, everything. Ever since then, she hasn't let anyone get close because she's afraid of loving and losing again. Lorenzo closed his eyes, guilt crushing him. He had pushed, insisted without understanding the depth of the wound she carried. "I didn't know. Now you do." Vera touched his arm. "So be patient, because if there's anyone who deserves to be happy again, it's her." That night, Lorenzo didn't sleep. He sat at the piano he hadn't touched in months, his hands trembling over the keys, and then slowly he began to play. It was the song his mother loved, the song she asked him to play when she was tired, when the pain became too much. He played until tears fell. He played until he felt that maybe, just maybe, he deserved a chance to start over too. The next day, Helena found a box on her doorstep. Inside, there was a blurry photograph, an image from a security camera on the sidewalk that night, the moment he first saw her, and a note. "I don't know if I deserve you, maybe I don't, but I know that since that night you've changed something in me. You've made me believe that there's still kindness, hope, love, and if you let me, I'll spend the rest of my life proving you weren't wrong to trust me. Lorenzo." Helena held the photo with trembling hands, tears streaming freely, because for the first time she understood. He wasn't there to save her. He was there because he, too, needed to be saved. Helena went to his apartment on a rainy Thursday. She didn't call, she didn't plan. She just went. When Lorenzo opened the door and saw her there, soaked, shivering, he said nothing. He just opened his arms, and she walked in. They held each other for long minutes in silence, letting the warmth of one heal the chill of the other. When they finally pulled apart, Helena was crying. "I'm so scared," she whispered. "Me too," Lorenzo confessed. "What if it doesn't work? What if it does?" She looked at him, and for the first time allowed herself to believe. Not because it was easy, but because it was worth trying. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "Neither do I." He smiled, sad and hopeful at the same time. "But we'll learn together." And when he kissed her, slowly, carefully, as if she were made of glass, Helena felt something inside her break and rebuild all at once. It was fear. It was hope. It was love. In the following days, they didn't hide anymore, not because they wanted to defy the world, but because they couldn't pretend any longer. Lorenzo took her out to dinner. Helena taught him how to laugh again. They walked hand in hand through the streets, ignoring curious glances, whispered gossip, because for the first time they both understood that true love doesn't apologize. It just exists. 6 months later, Helena was still working as a cleaner, not because she had to. Lorenzo had offered financial help countless times, but because she wanted to, because that job defined her, kept her grounded in reality, and Lorenzo respected that. He, in turn, had returned to playing the piano, not for audiences, not to impress, but for her. On nights when the world felt too heavy, he would sit at the piano and play, and Helena would curl up on the couch, listening, feeling. They weren't perfect. They argued, disagreed, fought about silly things and important things, but every time they came back to each other, because they learned that love isn't about not falling, it's about getting back up together. One Sunday morning, Lorenzo woke up and found Helena by the window, watching the city awaken. He came up behind her and hugged her, his chin resting on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" "How strange life is," she replied, a faint smile on her lips. "A year ago I was alone, tired, invisible, and now I'm seen." She turned her face to him. "By you." Lorenzo kissed her temple softly. "You were always visible, Helena. I was just lucky enough to look in the right direction." They didn't know what the future held, but they knew that whatever it was, they would face it together, because true love doesn't need guarantees, it just needs courage, and they had that in spades. And that's how two wounded hearts discovered that love, when it's true, always finds a way. So, what did you think of this story? What was the moment that touched your heart the most? Leave your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That way you'll never miss our love stories.